Ellariku namaskara. Firstly, my apologies for having to do this presentation in English, precisely because of the topic of Madurai Mani Iyer, which is totally defined by the free flow, that is the Sarvalagu. And if I start speaking in Kannada, definitely there would not be any Sarvalagu in it. It will be a gross injustice to the great artist. So my apologies, and this presentation will be in English. I'll start this presentation by playing a small clip. That was a clip from a 78 RPM recording. So in general, when you listen to 78 RPM records, you would find that there is a slight sense of, hurry or an urgency because of the limitation the recording itself put in. The artist may want to showcase a lot, but then there is only 3 minutes on either side of the record that one could record, right? So in general, you would see that the speed is a little bit more. They would like to pack more than what the time frame would accommodate, because they would like to give more. But if you listen to this 78 RPM record, it is just another concert rendition. That feeling of relaxed approach, or not being aware of anything else, just singing, just to enjoy the beauty of that Kamboji or the Gandharam of that Kamboji, right? That the way he goes about, the approach is not different at all. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it is in a concert, whether it is in a radio concert, whether it is in front of connoisseurs, or in front of it's a temple concert with 3,000 odd people sitting there, or just a 6 minutes rendition of a 78 RPM record. But the other thing to note is right from the word go, right, hitting the strides right from the word go. It just happens, you take any recording of Madurai Mani Iyer, he doesn't require any momentum to build or any time for him to, hitting the strides or anything like that. That is something which is very, very unique about it. I particularly chose this recording because it is wonderful, as well as, just to drive home the point on just a free flowing, forgetting anything else, just free flowing music for music's sake music. That is Gana Kaladara Madurai Mani Iyer. Sri Arvind Hebbar told me that in his channel he has, of course, reminisced about many great legends and he has definitely covered the biographical sketch, all those details of Madurai Mani Iyer as well in his talk. This will be primarily focused on the music of Madurai Mani Iyer. Nevertheless, for completeness sake, I will briefly mention some of the biographical aspects, even though it could be a repetition, but it would be short. It is not a detailed biographical sketch. If you just look at the major influences of Madurai Mani Iyer, the number one is, of course, Madurai Pushpavarnam, his uncle. Definitely, he was very young. There is even a photo of Madurai Mani Iyer sitting on Sri Pushpavarnam's lap. Nevertheless, he would have not had a chance to learn from him, but he represented his legacy. In fact, in his own words in an All India Radio interview, he acknowledges that his initial breaks, initial opportunities were a little bit easier because he represented that legacy. He was related to Madurai Pushpavarnam, who was a big star in his own days, although he died young. He, of course, learned from Rajam Bhagavathar. Both Rajam Bhagavathar and Pushpavanam were students of Ettayapuram Ramachandra Bhagavathar, of course. And then when Muthaiya Bhagavathar started a school in Madurai, music school, he was part of that school as well. And he learned both from Rajam Bhagavathar as well as from Muthaiya Bhagavathar in the school. Nevertheless, the biggest thing that we attach with Madurai Mani Iyer is his Swaram singing. And he has acknowledged himself that it is not something that he had come up with, and he did get influenced a lot on those patterns of Swaram singing by Mazhavarayana Subbarama Bhagavathar, who was a Sangeeta Kalanidhi as well. He has also mentioned that there was one Madurai Nagaswami Bhagavathar in Madurai who had a huge repertoire of Tyagaraja Kritis, who would never repeat compositions, and he has gone and listened to him quite a bit and assimilated quite a bit from that as well. One of the other major influences in his music, his approach, has been Maharajapuram Vishwanath Iyer. I think anybody who followed, who came after Maharajapuram Vishwanath Iyer's time, as well as T.N. Rajaratnam Pillai's time, have been influenced by their music. Anything which was adventurous, which had an element of excitement, element of innovation, had something to do with the influence of these two great personalities, and Madurai Mani Iyer was no exception as well. The other major influence, especially from the perspective of the Dikshitar Kritis, has been T.L. Venkatrama Iyer. And he was related to TLV as well, so he did learn a few compositions from him, and the reverential approach to the Dikshitar Kritis did come from TLV. So these are some of the personalities which influenced Madurai Mani Iyer's music. Let's briefly look into Sri Madurai Mani Iyer's career. His debut was at 12 years age at Sivagangai, according to him himself. And then in the 1927 music conference, interestingly, that was a Congress conference in which the first music conference happened in 1927 in Chennai as part of the Congress conference. That is when they passed a resolution that they would start the music academy in Chennai and all that. It was one of the landmark events as far as Carnatic music is concerned. There were several papers presented as well. Young Madurai Mani Iyer, along with his father, has presented a paper in the 1927 conference. By then, of course, he had started performing as well. But unfortunately, his father passed away, and it somehow happened that it had to be on him that he would not just establish himself as a concert artist, but also need to take care of his the family burden as well. So as an earning member, even though he was quite young. So his performing career in those days, I would say, in the as he rightly says, he did get several opportunities, but he had a very strong conviction, even though he was fairly different from the other contemporary musicians' style of those time. And I think that conviction did pay him rich dividends, even though in those initial days he might have encountered some criticism. The biggest breakthrough, of course, came in 1929 when he sang at a function of K.V. Krishnaswamy Iyer, the one who was related to the Madras Music Academy, at his house when all artists as well as several Rasikas of Mylapore was there. That concert became a huge success, and it did pave way for more opportunities for coming in. He has also mentioned about the voice experiments he did because of the voice breaking in and how he encountered it all elaborately in the radio interview as well. And even in those initial days, if you look at the old reviews from the magazines, it seems like he had a huge liking for singing several rare ragas, which were not really in vogue to be sung elaborately. For example, in an alapna or with plenty of kalpaneswarams and stuff like that. It seems that even though he had a huge liking for it, of course, he had got some really good advice from a few accompanists. For example, Semmangudi Narayanaswamy Iyer, or Thiruvalangadu Sundaresh Iyer, or Varahur Muthuswamy Iyer. They seem to have instilled in him that you can sing all this, but anyway, the bread and butter of Carnatic music is still the Gana ragas, so you should focus on them. So he seemed to have taken that advice really well. While he did not let his penchant for rare ragas go, he did maintain and gave the lion's share of his concerts to the Gana ragas. And it is very clear that it was not the connoisseurs who recognized his music first. It appealed to the common man a lot more. People started flocking his concerts in hundreds, and it somehow he became a sensation that the connoisseurs or even the sabas, the satya or the truth in that music was so powerful that they could just not deny him a place. He was a star even in the 30s, and the first Kacheri set of course was recorded in I think in the year 1935 or 1936, which was again a big hit. Another key event in his life was his meeting with Papanasham Shivan and popularizing his compositions, especially the mega hits of Madurai Mani Iyer, the Kanakan Kodi or the Kapali or Karpagame. They were huge hits among the masses. He was actively part of the Tamil Sai movement, supporting it, popularizing several immortal kritis as well. Then in the 1942, because of the Second World War or the threat which was posed in Chennai, several musicians of course moved their bases out of Chennai. Madurai Mani Iyer moved to Mayavaram, and that is when his attachment to the temples or the temple concerts started happening. In fact, there is an interview of Madurai Somu which is published, where Madurai Somu has mentioned that there is not a single temple in Tamil Nadu where either me or Madurai Mani Iyer have not sung. They were so popular that, and also so approachable. Anybody felt that, they could approach Mani Iyer and Mani Iyer would definitely sing. He would not deny their opportunity. So, especially this combination of Madurai Mani Iyer, Thiruvalangadu Sundaresh Iyer and Palani Subramaniam Pillai was in great demand, especially around the belt of Tanjavur, where there were so many temples and temple festivals where hundreds of people or thousands of people would assemble just to listen to Madurai Mani Iyer. In fact, today when we say Madurai Mani Iyer, the title that we associate with is called the Gana Kaladara Mani Iyer. If you look at the history, there are so many titles which are shared by many musicians. But if you look at Gana Kaladara, there is only one musician who is given this title of Gana Kaladara. It is because in 1940s, the Rasikas of Madurai Mani Iyer, they came together in Tanjavur and they chose this title and they gave it to him. That is the reason that there is no other musician who has this title. He also felt it very close to his heart that he always liked to put that title before his name. It is almost as if the Rasikas of Madurai Mani Iyer are one big family. They have come together because of Mani Iyer, and Mani Iyer is also part of that. And you can still feel that, even now, before these all this COVID, every month in PS High School, there would be at least 100 people sitting there just listening to the same recordings of Madurai Mani Iyer again and again, if you go and be part of that, you may feel as if Madurai Mani Iyer is there. You can feel that presence just through that music, through those recordings. He was extremely popular, in Chennai. The bus stop close to his house was called as Madurai Mani Iyer stopping and all that. And from the other side, he was also, through his lifestyle, he was a Gandhian through his life, and he was very interested in literature, and he also made sure that through his music, he also sent some strong messages through his actions as well as his music, which benefited the society as well. He chose to wear the khadi as a mark of a Gandhian. And when, of course, Mahatma Gandhi passed away, he had also sung some compositions. Even before that as well, there have been several compositions which were related to the national movements, or even some of the compositions on Subramanya Bharati or composed by Subramanya Bharati were rendered by him, which added to the national fervor. I would like to pause here and play a small clip of a Pallavi, which is on Mahatma Gandhi, which has been taken from a composition which was specially composed for Madurai Mani Iyer to sing as a tribute to Gandhi when Mahatma Gandhi was unfortunately assassinated.
Mahatma Mani Ma perum talaival Gandhi Mahatma Mani Ma perum talaival Gandhi Mahatma Mani
Of course, he has been a popular musician from the 30s, and for the next 20 years he was one of the artists who was in great demand. And in terms of the awards, from the late 50s, he had received a lot of recognition, including the Sangeeta Kalanidhi Award in 1959 and the President's Award as well, which followed. He was, of course, also given the Isai Perennier Award from the Tamil Isai Changam as well. But in really, it is in people's heart that he got that recognition. He found a place, and he still is, even after several decades after his passing away, he still finds that niche place, especially in the if you look at if you write the history of Carnatic music, there will be few people who can just who you cannot just imagine avoiding. You have to mention them because they are synonymous with Carnatic music, and one such musician is definitely Madurai Mani Iyer. Before breaking down his music into several individual aspects, I would just like to spend a few minutes explaining his philosophy of music. As I already said, the first thing that characterizes his music is the free flow, right? In fact, I have had a very interesting conversation with Professor TRS, where he explained once that the basic element that creates any kind of excitement in our music is the friction. For example, an Aridi in a Pallavi, or some Sangadis in a Kriti, or the Odukals or the Kanakas in the either in Neravel or Swaram. What it creates is basically creating a slight friction on a smooth flow, which kind of catches the attention of people who are listening to it, which makes us sit uptight and listen to it. And you cannot, of course, create too much of friction which will make the whole music stop or stall, but you need that slight element of friction which just gives us that impetus. And he would explain it so well. He has also done that in some of his lectures on Pallavi as well. And interestingly, in a private conversation which I had the chance to discuss with him, he mentioned that there was one musician who did not need this friction at all to create any kind of excitement. That was Madurai Mani Iyer. He was one musician. It is almost like he was doing an ice skating. This is exactly his words. He said, so when you do an ice skating, why do you need friction? It is so smooth and flowing that friction is not even needed. Even it's only that grace and that free flow that creates so much of excitement that he said that there were two musicians who did not need this. One was Rajaratnam Pillai, because he was like a waterfall where you just really don't understand what hit you, and the other was Madurai Mani Iyer, which was totally different from what Rajaratnam Pillai was. Nevertheless, the common element which was linking them was this lack of friction, and particularly in Madurai Mani Iyer's case, that free flow of music. There is other, if you contemplate, if Madurai Mani Iyer's music, people say, even when you look at from a spiritual perspective, there is an amount of freshness that you need in life, so that every day is an event, every day is a celebration. One thing which really hampers us from achieving this is our own knowledge that we gain. One of the things that people aspire is to get a freedom from the known, which is something you can see in his music. Every time he sings, let's say it's the same Kamboji, but every time he sings it is that childlike enthusiasm that when a child sees something for the first time or the first few times, the kind of enthusiasm that it shows, that is something as time progresses we lose, because we start taking things for granted. But in his music, every time he renders a phrase, it has that freshness, and you can see that he is exactly excited the same way as if he is seeing it for the first time, or a child seeing an elephant for the first time. Basically, that enthusiasm, you see a tree or an elephant, you don't get so excited. But when you see a child get excited about it, somehow it has a transformation in you, that you become that child and you also go to your own childhood days and get the same excitement. That is the kind of chemistry it works in Madurai Mani Iyer's music, where he just not gets excited and feels fresh about a phrase, even though he has been singing this for maybe a millionth time. He is also able to communicate that to the listener, where the listener also gets that excitement. And then you can also feel there is a constant sense of exploration in his, especially either it is Raga Alapana or Neravil. You can definitely feel that it is an instantaneous music, something which is on the spot, and nothing is something set. Even the choice of his songs, because either it is dictated by the choice of the listeners who have come in, who wanted him to sing it, or he is choosing it on the spot. There is absolutely nothing in his music which suggests that this is pre-planned, this is worked out, especially, except for the way he dealt with the compositions with the right reverence. And the other element is the celebration. There is a very interesting article which is written by Y. Mahalinga Sastri, where he has mentioned that when other musicians sing, you can clearly see there is one singer, there is a violinist, there is a mridangam player, and they are accompanied, there are boundaries. But if you listen to Madurai Mani Iyer's music, you somehow feel that there is no boundaries. It is not, it is not as if, when does he give the opportunity for the violinist to play? When does he take over from the violinist? Everything is so seamless. For example, if you take a Neravil, it is not restricted by, okay, I sang for 2 avartas, now the violinist will play for 2 avartas or nothing like that. It is so instantaneous. He would sing and somehow midway Lalgudi Jayaraman would start continuing, and then as Lalgudi Jayaraman is playing, he would just take over it, and then he would beautifully, enjoy a gumki played by Payani Subramaniam Pillai, and then he would pause and then he would just listen to it, encourage Muruga Bhupati to play for a few more avartas and then join in. So it's absolutely celebration. That is what mattered to him, rather than clear demarcations. And it also leads us to the other element where about his approach towards grammar. When it came to the raga lakshanas or the kritis, of course he respected the grammar more than anyone else. If you take it, what are the basis of our Carnatic music grammar, which is the Sthana Suddha, the Shruti Suddha. There is no one you can think of who respected it and who executed it to such perfection. But nevertheless, he never let this grammar become a shackle. He has taken several liberties only to enhance the ultimate purpose of our music. It is wherever there were liberties, it always made sure that the overall aesthetics or overall the purpose of the end purpose was not compromised. So he had a very strong conviction, and he executed it. That it was so convincing that it was part of a personality. It's not something as an imitation or something for sake of doing, or as an element to portray his ego or his prowess. It was as a commonly used word today. It was as organic as it could be. The other element of I would like to point to is which is something we also discussed briefly, although not explicitly. He was the first Rasika on stage, right? Either especially of his accompanists, and getting inspired from them and creating a magic that it was never that 1 + 1 + 1 was 3. Somehow he found a way to make a resonance out of this combination, and always delivering more than what it was, as it was not a mere sum of individuals coming together, but a much bigger output that people enjoyed. There are several anecdotes which say his utmost respect for the listeners. He always respected listeners' choice. There are even concert recordings where towards the end of a concert, where people would ask for some big heavy kriti, for example, even after their post Pallavi concert, there have been instances recorded where somebody had requested him to sing a Chakkani Raja, that he felt that he is obliged to sing because the listener is important, and which is probably another reason why people felt that it was their Mani Iyer, and he would do anything for them as well. And the last element I would say is, it doesn't matter what he was singing, he was completely immersed in it. Especially some of those renditions where you just see him hold a note, maybe a Gandhara in a Shankarabharanam, or you take any raga where he just aligns himself with the Tara Shadja, that he is absolutely immersed in it, and somehow he is able to make you forget anything else, and he gives you no option but to join the whole immersion process, and the raga let take over. That experience is something magical. The first aspect that we would like to look into is his voice. Right? Any singer, you take the first element that hits us is the voice quality or the tone, right? There are many voices which can be described in multiple different ways. But one definition I saw of Madurai Mani Iyer was, it was sweetest and the cutest. Especially this word cutest. I don't know how many voices in Indian music that you can actually term as cute and people will accept that. This is something, you have to listen and experience it. This is not something, because so many of these things are something which cannot be explained. But I would just say, either it was the intonations he used, or the way he went about it. But definitely you can feel a sense of cuteness because it was part of the personality as well. It never came out as something which he was trying to do differently. It just flowed and it seemed so cute. And it was so sweet, especially because of the alignment to the every swarasthana that he sang. It was pitch perfect is something if you want to define, you can define it on Madurai Mani Iyer's voice. As I said, the utmost fidelity to the Shruti. He started singing micless, and at the cost of repeating myself, his ability to hit the swarasthana accurately was unmatched. And the other element you can notice is those days, of course, concerts were, even without advertisement, by default were at least sung for 4 hours or more, right? And then it was uniformly fresh throughout the concert. It was not like he needed some time for his voice to warm up, nor after singing for a few hours it became tired, where he was you could sense that in his voice. You can sense from the word go till the end of the concert, it was uniform and uniformly fresh. And then the unique intonations that he made without sounding gimmicky were the part of his personality as well as his music as well. With that, let us move into the next aspect of his music, the Raga Alapana. In the Raga Alapana, at the first glance, one may think that it is very simple. It seems like he is singing many short phrases, and then it's what's the big deal in this? Anybody who is interested or who has learned, who is practicing music, would be able to sing something like that. But then only when you start singing that you would understand that it is deceptively simple. Primarily, the whole raga concept itself is embodied on the concept of purity. Right? Everything that you touch is so pure. That is something which comes after several lives of tapas that one does. One needs to be extremely blessed and to have worked for, first of all, the consciousness as well as the execution. It is something which is not something you can take it for granted. The other unique feature you would see in his music is a lot of plain notes that are used. Even though Carnatic music is characterized by the oscillations or the gamakas, the plain notes also play, especially the pure plain notes, they play a significant role in the elaboration of raga, and that is something which is beautifully shown by his music. Usually his alapanas are very crisp and clear. You will never feel any doubt. I mean, you listen to a Pantorali and you will never mistake it for a Purvi Kalyani. And you will not feel that he has oversung it or over elaborated. Usually they are very crisp. And you can definitely, as I mentioned earlier, they are extempore to the core. Right? Nothing pre-planned. And there is an element of effortlessness, whether he sang any raga, for example, whether it could be a rare raga, Gana raga, Rakti raga, whatever it meant. And there have been several years, where he had been singing with, significant health condition. Despite that, you can feel a sense of effortlessness in his music. Especially when you hear the rare ragas that you don't usually listen to elaborately. For example, a Jayanta Sena or a Ravi Chandrika or so many ragas that he popularized. You feel as if these are as often heard as a Mohanam or a Kalyani, and that effortlessness is something you can really feel as well. I would just like to pause here and play a short audio. As you have seen in the Ravichandrika clip, as I said, it was extempore, all right. And in general, people say that, the way we sing ragas have two approaches, and we take inspiration from both approaches, one from the veena and the other from the Nagaswaram, for us to sing the raga alapana. Even in his case, that is true, but the way it is come together is not the typical way that we think of the veena and the Nagaswaram coming together. In his case, that short phrases, developing a raga with several short phrases akin to how you would do that in a veena. And then when it came to the Nagaswaram, if you look at the alapana of a Nagaswaram, there is an element of uncertainty to it. You can never pinpoint and say that, this is what is going to be the next phrase, or it wouldn't be a step-by-step process that you would typically associate with it. You can never predict the core of the. If you think of a scale of a raga and the core of that progression moving, when you listen to Nagaswaram, it is something which is very unpredictable, and it will never be in a structured way, but it will be around the core of the raga itself, and it would be moving in ways where you could never predict it, and that is something you can also feel when you listen to Madurai Mani Iyer's music, and that's how these two things coming together. And then this pauses that he leaves, these are, there are many people who have said that silence is as important as any of the sound that we make in our music. And this pregnant pauses that you can see in his Raga Alapana, they carry so much weight in it, and it gives you that moment for you to assimilate that one phrase, and also it creates that suspense in it. There are multiple times he sings one phrase, but it never feels that that phrase is in repetition. It is almost as if, it's kind of a build-up to what is going to come next. That repetition is a build-up. It never seems like it is a repetition. That phrase, it has a different intent every time he sings. I have heard many, for example, if I have to quote, if he sings a Mapadanisa in Vachaspati, every time that Mapadanisa ends with a different thing which is totally unpredictable. So which creates, how much ever time he sings, you never feel bored or, feel that it is repetitive. Whereas, if you break it down, that is why I said its music is, deceptively simple. Because if you write down this approach in paper, it may seem like, there are so many phrases which are repeated, or these are simple phrases, simple combination. But if you look in, or even, this is this intonation that he sings, this is the vowel he uses more ikara, ukara, and all those. These are all some external aspects of it. Sometimes we get carried away by these external aspects and attribute this as Madurai Mani as Bani, whereas these are all only the external aspects of it. The purity and his connect with the raga itself, which is what makes all these external things go away, and that is something which is unfortunately cannot be documented or written down, the core of that. But that is something you can definitely realize. So this is the challenge of Madurai Mani's music, where what you are able to perceive in words is not, something which is doing justice to what his Bani is. But if you want to know his Bani, it's not easier. It is not easy to explain, but it is very easy to experience. All you have to do is just listen to it. I would also like to play one more to emphasize, what his Bani is, which is definitely on the clarity as well as on the purity of music, by playing another clip, this time from a Ganaraga Kalyani. This is from a Jamshedpur concert. Again, his camaraderie comes through. In this, for example, in this Kalyani, he sings for 6 minutes, but he allows the violinist to explore it for more than 6 minutes, and he has absolutely no problem with that. At the end of the day, the full Kalyani should reach the audience together. There are so many phrases. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to listen to all of it. There are so many phrases when Sri Lalgudi Jayaraman plays. Mani Iyer is so excited, and he wants him to play more. With that encouragement, he even overshoots, what the singer has sung, and he is absolutely fine with that. With that background, now I'll play the clip and we'll listen to it. So the next aspect that we would see is about his kritis, the kriti rendition itself. As inspired by many of his generation, his kacheri pattern was also akin to what Ariyakudi Ramanujaya Iyengar had established, which meant that it was predominantly Madhyama Kala kritis, adorning his concerts. One particular aspect I would like to highlight is the Sangati selection. He definitely chose Sangatis which aided the Shruti alignment. I mean, he did not want to choose a Gamakam which could sometimes result in lapse in a Shruti. That doesn't mean that he compromised on the Raga Swarupam. Definitely, for example, if he sang a Suruti, it did come out as a Suruti, but if you compare it with some other artist, maybe his approach, you can see that, maybe it was slightly lesser in Gamakam, or he avoided certain Sankatis, which might, influence the Shruti alignment. For anything he did for him, that purity of that alignment was extremely important. Even in the Raga Alapana, you can listen to, or even during Neravel, he would always, even though such a great artist who had internalized so much in him, he would just test water slightly and say, okay, I mean, between a phrase and other phrase, he will just see whether he is perfectly aligned. That slight check, that minute check he would do, that is the reverence he had for this concept of Shruti as well as the purity of the note. Just to re-emphasize, I'm saying this even though it's a repetition. There is a myth about Madurai Mani Iyer that, his repertoire was limited and he sang the same kritis over and over. Fortunately for us, among his peers in Carnatic music, Madurai Mani Iyer has been one of the widely recorded musicians. If you look at the number of concert recordings we do have a long list of songs that he has sung. In fact, there are some songs which we have the recordings of only him singing. For example, I would say a Tamil song, Vele Vellum Vinay Vellum. I have not heard anyone else sung this song. There is also an anecdote which was written by Subbudu in a magazine where he has actually, encountered Madurai Mani Iyer before a concert in Delhi, and he has basically expressed saying that you seem to be singing the same songs again and again, and what do you think of that criticism? And Madurai Mani Iyer has said, okay, what do you want me to sing? And he basically, Subbudu has expressed his interest, saying that he wants to listen to some songs that he has not heard before and which are not the usual hits of Madurai Mani Iyer. In that particular concert, Madurai Mani Iyer has sung so many kritis which were so rare that they have not heard before. And after the concert, when Subbudu approached Madurai Mani Iyer to go and thank him, basically what Madurai Mani Iyer did was, he just put his hand inside his pocket and then gave him a handful of chits. And the whole chits had repeatedly, requests for his own, hit songs, a Karpagame, or a Kapali, or a Kana Kankodi, or a Chakkani Raja, or a Meenakshi Memudam. So basically, Madurai Mani Iyer has said, see, I have satisfied one Rasika today, but then there have been so many people who would have been disappointed. So the point was that his concerts were mostly listeners' choice. Because he gave so much importance to the listeners, and the listeners wanted to listen to those songs over and over, and then he sang it. That doesn't diminish his repertoire at all. Even if we take some of his popular kritis, there are certain kritis that he popularized. For example, the Dikshidhar Navagraha kritis. He was one of the first musicians who made sure that he would sing the Varakriti, whichever day it was, and we have all the Varakritis rendered by him. And he also made sure, definitely he sang the Kamalamba Navavarnam, at least one of the Kamalamba Navavarnam in his concerts. Popularizing these two of those from the Dikshidhar pantheon would be credited to Madurai Mani Iyer. There are, of course, we have also discussed this before, there are several Papanasam Sivan Kritis which were popularized by him. The other major contribution for him was on popularizing Muttaya Bhagavatar songs. He came from that school and he also took it in him to popularize many of the songs from his Guru Parampara as well. And there were so many rare compositions which were popularized by him. Some of them were even the lighter pieces. For example, the Kandan Karunai, or even Subramanya Bharati songs, the Vellai Thamarai, or even Tirupugars. Many of those were popularized by him, and they became extremely popular among the public as well. There's another element which I would just like to briefly touch upon was, in those days, people associated certain hits with an artist. A contemporary would hesitate to basically sing that song because of, the comparisons that would come up. But Madurai Mani Iyer was never afraid of, borrowing songs from someone else's repertoire, and he was never worried about all these comparisons. In fact, it is a documented fact that the Sarasa Samadhana was, widely introduced in the concert stage, first by GNB. But Madurai Mani didn't have any problem borrowing it and singing it. And it became such a rage that today when you think of Sarasa Samadhana, you think of Madurai Mani Iyer first. There are many other compositions where, you would first think of some other musician, but then he never had any ego nor any inhibition in taking it and executing it. The next aspect that we would look into is Neravel. Actually, Madurai Mani Iyer's music is, for common people, it is always associated with the swarams that he sang. But one aspect which he sang with equal vigor, as well as the extensivity, if you take the number of minutes that in a concert where he had sung elaborately, in fact, in many concerts, the time he took for Neravel would exceed the time he would execute the swarams. But somehow it did not get the right amount of attention that his swarams, of course, because of the swaying nature of the swarams, people always associated his music with the Kalpana swarams. His Neravel was extremely unique. In fact, I would even say it had, there are elements of his Neravel where he would break the rules for the sake of, not for the sake of doing it, but for the sake of conveying a better meaning or being one with the raga. In fact, the rule says that if you do a Neravel, you have to take a complete line which conveys a meaning. But the point to underscore is to complete the meaning of the song. Even if he sang Kalinil Chilambu, that line is Kalinil Chilambu Konja Kaivalai Kolunga Muttu Malagal Asaya Tiruvasalil Vandan. But what's the purpose of that? What is the meaning of that line? It conveys the beautiful dance or the dance-like walk of Krishna, the Lord Krishna, right? Even with these two words, Kalinil Chilambu, he is able to convey the whole meaning. If you take the line Ethanayo Piravi Edetedete Ilaite, even with Ethanayo Piravi, he is able to convey that by repeatedly saying Ethanayo, or not even Ethanayo Piravi, just Ethanayo, that one word, he is able to convey what the whole line is conveying. So that way he is still aligned with the fundamental purpose of what the Neravel is. It was definitely very emotional and as well as suggestive. When any art, more than, especially in Indian art, it's not only a realistic representation, but is also a suggestive representation, wherein through a form of suggestion we are able to imagine things sometimes which even the artist or the composer has not thought about, but we are able to get the slightly more other interpretations and dimensions of it. That is the beauty of art itself. Art is not restrictive but suggestive. Going back to the same example of Ethanayo Piravi, by singing the whole line Ethanayo Piravi Edutedute Ilaithen, you are conveying one meaning. But by just saying Ethanayo Piravi, why is that one should feel that so many births are full of sorrow, and I agonize about that. There could be other, especially if you are in this bliss of the spiritual bliss or the blessings of the Lord, then there could be so many bursts that you could take and you may still enjoy it. And that is the kind of suggestions, the Neravel of Madurai Mani Iyer gave us scope for such interpretations as well. And you can see, especially if you take the same ragas, for example, let's say a Todi, the kind of emotions, the range of emotions he conveyed through Neravel in various compositions. For example, a Neravel in Tambura Chekuni in Kolo Maragada was vis-a-vis some other Neravel, let's say a Kalin in Chilambu. The range of emotion, the kind of emotions it portrayed was extremely different, and he had that and it transcends to another plane. It is not restricted by what raga he was singing, what the composition was, what the lines was. He was able to transcend all that and convey to a deeper, take us to a different, deeper plane. That is what his Neravel is about. Now let's listen to one of the Neravels. Of course, to do real justice of it, we may have to listen to several of his Neravels, and each of that, if you have the time, it would take, let's say 15 to 20 minutes as well. But unfortunately, for the paucity of time, I'll play a small snippet.
சிலம்பு காலில் சிலம்பு காலில் சிலம்பு சிலம்பு காலில் சிலம்பு காலில் சிலம்பு காலில் சிலம்பு காலில் சிலம்பு காலில் சிலம்பு
Now next we will look into the Kalpanaswarams. As I said earlier, this is probably the most discussed aspect of Mani Iyer. He was most famous for the what in Tamil they call as Rail Vandi Swaram. Like as if in a goods train there is a compartment after compartment, the Swarams would line up and then he would keep singing on it. Basically, you would find that the Sarvalagu is again a term which is something not really appreciated enough. The name conveys everything. So in Lagu or Layam, when you say to become one with, the meaning of Laya is to merge or to become one with. And for everything to merge together, to come in sync is called Sarvalagu. When we say this term Sarvalagu, do we think about the intensity of that word? But if we have to really understand it from that real intention of that word, then we don't have to, if we are not able to understand it, then we just have to listen to Madurai Mani Iyer's music. And that is what, because that Sarvam comes into a Laya, and that Sarvalagu you can see in his music, especially in his Kalpanaswarams. And that is what it makes, because Sarvalagu people generally think it is monotonous or repetitive. It is neither of these two. Just to emphasize this point, I would like to play two clips. Both Swarams in Bhairavi, both in the same song, Koluvai, but on two different occasions with two different set of accompanies. One with Palghat Mani Iyer in the Mridangam, the other with C.S. Murugabhupati on the Mridangam. Just listen to these two clips, then you will understand how that everything comes in sync totally at the same time in a totally unique way on that particular day because of that circumstances, because of the singer's mood, the accompanist, everything comes beautifully in sync. Both give the same impact, yet both are unique and totally different.
Gari 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 ri 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 gari ri 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 ga ma gari ga dari gari ri 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 ga ma ma ga ga dari ri da dari ga dari ri ri da dari 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 ri ri gari 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 ga butti ga buttari ga butti dari dari gari gari ri gari ga pa gari datti gari dani datti dani dani da dari ri baba da dari ri da dari gari ri dari 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 ri baba dari ri dani da baba dani dari gari ri dani dani da dari dari ri gari 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 ga ma gari ga dari gari da pari dari baba dari dari da badani da dari da dari da dari dari ri ga dari li dari ga ga da dari dari da dari ga bu gari ga ma gari da dari ga ga ni dari gali dari da dari dari baba da baba da baba pari dari dari da badari da dari dari simale gari ga da dari dari da dari da dari da dari 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 ga dari ga dari 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 baba da baba dari 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 da dari da dari dari da baba dari dari pari da baba dari da baba da baba da baba dari dari badani dari dari da badani da baba baba
Pamagari gama pada pada baba gama pada baba gari gama pada maendesu ida baba pada pada baba gama pamagari gari gama pada maendesu pada mappa 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 da da ma ga ma go ri ri da 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 ri ga pa ne ri ga pa ma ri ga pa ma ri ga ma ga ri da ri ga ma ga ri da ri ga pa ne ba ba ma go ri ri ga ri ga pa ma ri ga pa ma ri ga da ri ga pa ne ga ri ga ri gari gari ri 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 ga pa ma ri ga ma ga ga ri ri da da ri ga ri ga ri ri da da ri ri da 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 ga ri da da ri da da ri da da ri da ri Pamaga, Pamagari, Karigama, Pamagama, Pamagori, the Rigama, Marigama, Rigama, Gamalava Magori, the Rigama, Marigama, Rigama, and
So as you can see in the first case with Palghat Mani Iyer, the focus of the Bhairavi it was on a slightly faster Kala Pramanam as well as covering on the upper octave, mostly around the Rishabham of the Bhairavi, and also he sang a Korappu there. Whereas when you see the next one, you can see a significant change in the Kala Pramanam. Also the focus of Bhairavi is more on the middle register, lower octaves, the regions. I mean, he also touched the upper key, but the focus was mostly on the middle register. And it was a totally different experience. Both are exhilarating experiences, but very unique. The other significant aspect that you would see is he would bring patterns after patterns, and also he will explore the musical patterns to its limits. And he would do it in a way where there will be an judicious mix of predictable vis-a-vis and unpredictable things. See, there are three things. There is a predictable aspect of a pattern, and there would be an unpredictable turn, and importantly there would be pauses in between. So it created a feel of a suspense when you listen to his swarams, and that appealed to the public. I mean, how many people would understand the scale of a Kapi Narayani, but they would still be able to understand or associate themselves with the overall suspense that it created, and he took people along with it in a very beautiful and a unique way. And he did attribute it to Mazhavarayana in the Subrahma Bhagavatar also, but it was him who actually made this style something appealing for any common person. In fact, TRS sir has even said that the generations of his, when they grew up, every person wanted to sing Swaram like Madurai Mani Iyer. This is something he has put on record as well. The other noticeable aspect you would see is the very stable Kala Pramanam in which he renders. There is No, generally when people sing from the lower speed to higher speed, you can see there is a tendency to increase the kala pramanam a little bit or fluctuate it. But in his case, you would never find that kala pramanam is extremely steady. In fact, there are some occasions where he has deliberately changed the kala pramanam just for the rendition of swarams. It is not something inadvertently creeping in. It is something which is a conscious decision. The kriti could have been rendered in a kala praman, but this is a very rare occasion, I'm saying. Not that in every song he did that, but in general, it is a very, very steady kala pramanam rendition. Whether it is lower speed or higher speed, the kala pramanam maintenance is extremely stable. The other aspect is, of course, he has sung swarams in all kinds of talas as well as edupus. In fact, there are some rare recordings where, since he is such an extempore musician, there are, unexpected places where he has sung. For example, in a Tirupugal, towards the end of a concert, when everybody thinks that it was a customary song that he would wind up, suddenly, at a moment of inspiration, he has sung 15 minutes of Kalpana Swaram with the Korapu in the Kandam, at an offbeat place for almost 15 minutes. So these are elements of extempore activity as well as innovation such sparks you could see in his concerts as well. There's one thing which really struck me, his clarity in thought towards this mathematical complications or calculations, or what in common parlance called as the Kanakku. He has in fact said, he has of course respected people who have gone and internalized it and who has sung beautiful mathematical patterns without compromising on the aesthetics. Nevertheless, he has assured from it, and he has also said that for me, especially, there are at times when this kind of complications are, practiced once at home, which are not extempore, then he has remarked that, I sing swarams for Manikam Vairam, maybe some other person is singing for Gari Sanida, which means that, only up to that Gari Sanida, whatever is sung is the actual Kalpana part. And if it is going to be a pre-practiced Kalpita part after that, then I don't really care much about it. The way he has put it so succinctly in one word, that I sing for Manikam Vairam, whereas the other person is singing for Gari Sanida, it actually struck me a lot. And the kind of clarity he has is something amazing. And on rare occasions, he has also executed some nadai changes. There is a recording of Mohana Rama where he has sung swarams in Tisra nadai as well. The next aspect that we would look into is Ragam Tanam Pallavi. Usually he did render Ragam Tanam Pallavi. Like many people in those times, they would choose a main kriti, and then they would also sing a Pallavi after that. And usually the main kriti would be slightly more elaborate and the Pallavi would be slightly shorter in many of the artist cases, and it is true for Mani Iyer as well. And he chose mostly the Gana ragas. But interestingly, there are some ragas, for example, a Latangi or a Keeravani, where we don't find any recording of his where he has sung these ragas elaborately, except for in the case of a Pallavi. Maybe he has sung it, but we don't have any recording of it. But he preferred a Simbendra Madhyamam or a Keeravani or a Latangi for a RTP than for taking it up as a song and rendering it elaborately. Another aspect in his RTPs are, especially if you take the ragam portion, in general the ragams are, for non-RTP pieces that is, they are rendered in a succinct way. Maximum you would find raga elaborations about 10-11 minutes, maximum 12 minutes. Whereas in certain cases, especially the radio concerts where it's an exclusive RTP concert, you can see that he has rendered it in multiple stages and even rendered it for close to 28 minutes, 30 minutes, just the ragam portions alone. This is something very unique you find in the RTP. And mostly if you take the Pallavi aspects, he does, Pallavis are also again vehicles for rendering ragas, but he doesn't get into the Trikalam exercise or doing the complications like Tisram or things like that. That it's not. I mean, there are some rare occasions where he has done it. I think even in the interview he says that, see, in my generation, if you have to become a vidwan, you have to establish yourself. The bare minimum requirement is to have the ability to sing an Alakalai Pallavi or something like that. So it's no question about his ability to sing. It's a conscious choice of what he thought was important and execution, rather than he chose to portray the raga than indulge himself in the mathematical aspects of the Pallavi. Tanam again is there are some recordings where he has elaborately rendered tanams. In fact, sometimes the tanam's duration would even exceed the elaboration of the raga portion or the alapana portions as well. And he has used the patterns beautifully, the semi-rhythmic patterns beautifully. And you will not generally find him using different tempos. It is usually rendered in one tempo, the Madhyama Kala tempo, and he would use a lot of interesting vowels which were unique to him, like da-da-ta and all that. You can see all that in the Tanam. And the patterns are also like in the Swaras. He would enjoy creating a lot of those beautiful Varja phrases. That is something you can really enjoy in the Tanam a lot more, and the patterns in it. And when it came to the Pallavi, one of the most looked forward aspects of his Pallavis were the Ragamalika Swaras. He really reveled, enjoyed rendering elaborate Ragamalika Swaras and portrayed the ragas, and he would also embellish the Ragamalika Swarams with liberal dose of alapana like phrases and several unique landing notes that became his. For example, the Gandharam of Kannada, the way he would render, that became his patent. So Ragamalika portions were also, and another important aspect is he did sing a lot of rare ragas in Ragamalika Swaras, which it is very rare to listen to otherwise. For example, Shatvidha Margini is something that we have heard him sing only in a part of Ragamalika Swaras. Now, looking at the post Pallavi, or what they call as the Tukda section, that was also again one of the most famous aspect of his concert. It was looked forward by all audiences, especially the common man was really after him for listening to his, let's say, a Vellai Tamarai or a Kandan Karune or an English note. And generally, you will find him sing an elaborate Viritham as a Ragamalika, elaborate Viritham or a Slokams. And he would also render in many concerts a Tirupugal as it's customary. On rare occasions, he has also sung Padams and Javalis, although not a regular feature. There are recordings of, for example, a Saki Prana or things like that. Many, even though these are, so-called light pieces, it is not that they were treated lightly. They were actually rendered with a lot of vigor, and again as a teamwork that people really felt a good closure. This is like it was almost like as if a good dessert was served in a meal, right? So and people were really relishing it. I think we have covered mostly all aspects of Madurai Mani Iyer's music, showcasing a tip of his iceberg. But given the time, that is all we could do. I would like to end this presentation by playing a beautiful piece, Kandan Karunai, which is a crowd favorite, and also thank you for the opportunity.
அருளொளே அவிகலந்தே அருளொளே அவிகலந்தே கலந்தே அல்பும் ஆற்றலும் அறிவும் நயந்தே அல்பும் ஆற்றலும் அறிவும் நயந்தே இருதுகமே இடர்கள் களைந்தே இருதுகமே இடர்கள் களைந்தே இருதுகமே இடர்கள் களைந்தே என்புற செய்திடும் இறைவன் கைதே என்புற செய்திடும் இறைவன் கைவேல் கந்தல் கருணை புரியும் படுவே வெம்பகை போன்றே வெற்றி தருவேல் வெம்பகை போன்றே வெற்றி தருவேல் வேத பொருளை விளக்கும் மயல்வேல் வேத பொருளை விளக்கும் மயல்வேல் நம்பும் அடியார் நலம் வளர்ப்பொல்வேல் நம்பும் அடியார் நலம் வளர்ப்பொல்வேல் நங்கை வள்ளியில் திருநாயகவேல் நங்கை வள்ளியில் திருநாயகவேல் கந்தல் கருணை புரியும் படுவேல் குன்று தோராடுவே குமரனுவே குன்று தோராடுவே குமரனுவே கோலமயோ நடம் கொதிடும் சௌவேல் கோலமயோ கொதிடும் சௌவேல் அண்டோடிடு ஆதிமகள் அண்டோடிடு அண்டோடிடு ஆதிமகள் அன்னை பாரா சக்தி அருள் சுடர்வில் கல்தல் கருணை புரியும் படுவே